This is Diamond D with where I'm giving you some love advice, some happiness advice, some everyday good advice to make your day a little more loving.
Hi, I'm Diamond D with Love and Happiness, where I'm giving you some love advice, some happiness advice, some everyday good advice to make your day a little more loving. Our guest today is Miss Anita Daniels. Anita Daniels is a licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical addiction specialist who provides behavioral health and addiction counseling. Ms. Daniels obtained a master's degree in social work from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a bachelor's degree in social work from Eastern Carolina University, and a sports counseling certificate from the California University of Pennsylvania. She is a member of the National Association of Social Workers, a founding member, vice president, and co-chair of the Pro Sports Committee of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. Ms. Daniels also serves as the Assistant Minister of Congressional Care and Counseling at Union Baptist Church in Durham. She has contributed to the following spiritual publications: How We Got Over, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Courage, Women of Color Devotional Bible, and Wisdom and Grace Study Bible for Young Women of Color. Welcome, Ms. Daniels, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
We are thrilled to have you.
Definitely, definitely thrilled. Very, very thrilled. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what else that you do?
Well, I tell people I'm Grits, a girl raised in the South. I've lived in North Carolina my entire life. I was raised by a Baptist preacher, and my grandmother and my mother with my brother and cousins, and we just had a wholesome childhood. My spirituality is a huge part of who I am as a person, and it just bleeds through into everything I do, including the work that I do now, particularly with the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. So that's one of the areas that I hope to talk a little more about. When I think about love and happiness, I think about the athletes that I work with and some of the stressors. Some of them have been um, sad, and as a result of the work that I've been able to do with them, are much happier. And it's nice to see them smile when we start their sessions versus being really sad and depressed like they were before we started.
So tell me more about the Alliance of Social Work. You created that organization, or how did it come about?
Well, actually, I am one of the founding members, but there were some other people who got started maybe a year before I came along. And so I decided, after watching an interview of Larry Fitzgerald with the Arizona Cardinals. So this is my story of how I got involved in sports. But he was telling a story about his mother um, being sick with breast cancer, and he was at Pitt at the time, and he got the call that he needed to come home. He decided to stay in practice instead. When he got home, his mother was unconscious and did not regain consciousness. And I pointed at the TV and said, he's going to need a therapist, because a lot of times when you think about the people you love, and especially our mothers, I mean, everybody, all athletes, the first thing they say is, I want to thank God and I want to thank my mother. And I thought, he's going to regret that decision. And recently, in October of this year, he wrote an article about that, and he said, I wish I could do that over. I regret that I wasn't present. And so, love is about everything that we do. It's a part of everything in life.
Okay, that's very true. It's interesting because I remember that story like it was yesterday, being an ESPN junkie myself, and like witnessing that whole story. Like Larry Fitzgerald is a really
He's
cool
awesome.
human being.
Hmm.
Yes. One question, since you mentioned about working with athletes, how did that even come about? Was it partly because of your spirituality and how you like emphasize with athletes in general, or just people overall, or how did that
Well,
actually?
I've been a therapist for years. I started my practice Actualities Limited back in February of 2002. And I work, I would say half of my work is with couples and individuals, and the other half of my work is with athletes. And so that's how it came about. Once I saw that story, I wondered, okay, how many other athletes might be making these kinds of choices that they will regret later? And that's what got me involved in learning more about working with athletes, because it is a special population. They have a lot of unique needs, particularly those who are collegiate athletes, because their day starts at 5 or 6 and ends at midnight, and they have to turn around and do it again, and they are concerned about keeping their scholarships and performing well. And a lot of them do want to be like a Larry Fitzgerald and make it to the pros. And so it is a lot of pressure on them and a lot of stress. And so I just prepared myself for that. And in the process of preparing myself, I learned about this organization that was trying to bring people together who were interested, and social workers in particular, who were interested in serving the athlete population. So I attended my first symposium. I think it was 2015, and it was at Clark Atlanta University, and I've been attending ever since, and will become the president of the organization in January of 2021.
Congratulations on that endeavor. I know you are very proud.
I am indeed. It seems like it all happens so quickly, but I am one of those kind of people that if I see something, if I see a need, I do step in and see how I can intervene. And so that's what I did.
A wonderful accomplishment. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the unique problems and the stressors for athletes, and whether those unique problems differ for the student athlete versus the professional athlete.
Well, they are definitely different, because the student athlete is worried about keeping their scholarship, which means they have to keep their grades up. They are concerned about injuries. They are concerned about keeping their position on the team, because people can lose their scholarships if they aren't performing well, and they have to keep their grades up. So it's so many things, and a lot of people don't think about it, but it's the equivalent of a full-time job. With professional athletes, it's a little bit different, but still some of the same things of having to keep the job, the extra publicity, and when you think about some of them deciding to protest during the Black Lives Matter and a lot of the injustices that we witnessed, and some of them taking a stand and recognizing that that could negatively affect them career-wise, but deciding that this is important, we have a voice, and we need to speak out. And some of the collegiate athletes did the same thing, but they did it on a smaller level. So they are anxious, they are depressed, they are concerned about their family, they are concerned about injuries, because some injuries can be career altering, which means they have to transition out of their sport. And so that's a lot of pressure. Most athletes want to play professionally, so the ones who go to college are hoping that they can make it to the pros, but it's a very small percentage. It's less than 1% that actually make it to the pros. And so it is a lot of pressure. And I wish all the fans love athletes, but they don't. If you have a bad day, they scream and call you names. It doesn't feel like a lot of love. And when you do really well and you win, oh, they love you. So, and thinking of love and happiness, as long as they're winning, Their fans love them and their fans are very happy.
So
Awesome.
true.
Yeah, that is so true because as normal people, at times when we look at sports, we don't really understand in terms of their personal feelings that goes along in the court and things of that nature. And we booing them and saying all these negative things, and they're human
Mhm.
beings just like you and I. So
Exactly.
it's something that at times as a fan we gotta be noted of that at times.
Mhm.
One question that I did have that I was curious about involving COVID at hand because I know it's like this is a brand new for everybody. In terms of the athlete, if you have any information on this, I would love to dive into that a bit. Involving like if have you dealt with anybody in terms of COVID that's been affected by COVID before and has it affected them in terms of like physical wise? Because I heard like COVID affects your breathing and a lot of things, and we look at athletes as put them on an injury report. Oh, he got COVID. He'll be back in a couple of weeks. No problem. He'll be back to normal, and don't understand the actual side effect with any, let alone with an injury, let
Mhm.
alone with something at that nature. So, have you experienced anything like that with an athlete
Well,
doing?
I have had some athletes who tested positive for COVID, and the toughest part of it is the isolation because then they have to be separated, quarantined literally from everybody. So it's almost like being in prison where they bring your food and put it at the door and leave so you can get your food and eat your meal. And so that part was, I think, the toughest for all of them is that isolation. I mean, when you think about all of us and holidays and birthdays, and we usually celebrate, and now we can't. And then you think about being part of a team, and now I can't even see my teammates. I cannot interact with them at all because I am quarantined for 14 days. So they've all told me that was the hardest part is the quarantine because they can't see anyone, and that's really hard. But they are getting tested regularly, I would say every week, sometimes several times a week. So that helps, and they can immediately, quarantine someone if they find out that they are testing positive. But it has limited the number of people that they can be exposed to, like their family or their other friends. So basically, they are with their teammates if they are spending time. And even in that, then you think about a football team of 60 people, but only 10 can be together. So you can't be with all 60. You can only be with 10 at a time. And so, yes, they practice together and things like that. But when it comes time to try to socialize, they do have to cut those numbers back to about 10 people at a time.
Yeah, that is difficult. I wanted to ask you more or less about the pressures of dating or marrying an athlete. Are those unique issues coming about because that person is a professional athlete?
So it can be just because, I mean, I think we've all heard of groupies. And so there are people who do not necessarily respect that an athlete is in a relationship with someone else. So that is some of the pressure that they deal with. The other pressures that they deal with, especially thinking about the professional athletes, is they have to deal with and the example I give is like their hands, people's hands are like cups. Everyone wants to, can I get some money? I'll never forget. I think it was Charles Barkley said someone asked him, "Can you give me $175,000 so I can buy a house?" And Charles was like, "Then I'm buying your house. You're not buying your house if I give you 175,000." But people, start to feel that they have the right to ask you um, for your money. So that's the other thing that they run into, or for special favors. And so, one of the things that we try to teach them is no is a complete sentence, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. So it's not your responsibility to fill pockets, purses, or any of those kinds of things. But that does happen, and that can put a strain on a relationship.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting to say the least. That is a lot. One question I do have, if I was an athlete per se, how would I know if I would be in need of just a therapist in general in terms of, you know, just being open to one? Because I know a lot of times, especially as a guy, we try to just handle things and figure things out on our own, and grow up and be tough minded and everything. But without mom, you don't have anybody else to really lean on at times. So in terms of that, like how like I guess what I'm trying to say is in terms of the signs that maybe in your life that you might be thinking, you know what, I might need to take part in therapy, just to clear my head or things of that nature.
And that's a very good question. And what the athletes discover is their inability to concentrate, their loss of appetite, their inability to sleep, they're not resting well, those kinds of things that affect their performance, and there are many, we have performance psychologists who work with them on mindfulness and thinking through ways that they can push through. But the thing that I've had several say to me is, Miss D, and that's what they call me, I'm Miss D, but they say, Miss D, if I am not anxious or stressed or depressed, I can perform. And it's really true. If I get enough sleep, if I get good food, if I'm not anxious and I'm not depressed, I can perform. But if I have all these things on my mind, um, then it's hard for me to focus. And that lack of focus is when they feel like, okay, I might need to talk to somebody because it's starting to feel like too much life is coming at me too fast.
So, do teams normally have a designated counselor assigned to them, like they do, like a personal trainer or a physical therapist or a doctor or nurse assigned to them? Or how does that sort of break up with, what you do, your counseling to athletes, and how it actually looks in everyday operations?
So it really depends on the organization. So the NFLPA is in the process of recruiting additional clinicians. So they have a health and wellness team, but they are also in the process of looking at recruiting clinicians where they have professional teams so they can refer some of the players to those clinicians if they need to. The Olympics are doing the same. I am also in the process of um, being approved by the Olympics to work with some of the Olympians. So I'm really excited about that. Um, the same with the NBA, the NBA Players Association. They have clinicians that are assigned, and they did a specific vetting process. So they have about 5 clinicians per team that they can refer the players to. And they just know that, they're human like everyone else. And actually, when you think about it, we are not on blast. I tell people now that I'm a forensic evaluator, I do really make sure I don't speed because if I get a ticket, then I have to go before the DA and the judge, and I wouldn't want them to ask me if I'm a law-abiding citizen. But you are always on blast. Everything you do, someone is watching. And imagine that. Imagine that no one would know if you got a speeding ticket, but someone would know if they did. And even if they're not a professional or collegiate athlete anymore, they will always be recognized as an athlete. And if you think about it, you think about when one passes, they'll say former NBA, former high school standout. Is all you are an athlete forever. So that is a lot of pressure.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Yes.
it is. And I know we're getting short on time, but I want you to talk a little bit about your vision as president of the Alliance of Social Workers. What are you planning with your platform once you become president?
So there are a couple of things that are important to me. The first is that I want to look at ways that we can work with all of the professional organizations. So not just the NBA and the NFL, but the MLB, the NHL, but looking at all of them, the WNBA, but ways that we can look at supporting athletes at all levels, ways that we can look at help educate parents about, as they're starting with their children young, um, also helping them understand about CTE, which is, brain trauma. And that has happened so much with athletes who use their heads. So you think about athletes who box or football players, sometimes even lacrosse players, anyone that's using their head as part of the sport that they are engaged in, and even when they're not, they can still get a head injury that could be very dangerous. And so those are some of the things that I want to do to help continue to educate the community and people in general to be kinder and gentler. DJ, you mentioned how, people boo and say, "You're sorry, get off the court," but that's someone's child. That's a person. It's not just, somebody that doesn't care about what they're doing. And so when you think about your job, that's their job. And when you think about your job, you wouldn't want someone to yell and say, "You're sorry, boo, get out, pack up your office and leave." So those are the things that we're trying to do, really help advocate for them more, and particularly for athletes of color, because we feel like still they are the ones who can benefit from the additional advocacy and support.
Okay.
How can people get in contact with you?
So to reach me, they can reach me at actualitiesLTD@gmail.com. They can also reach me by phone, 919-564-9360. And if they're interested in becoming a member of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, our website is www.aswis.org.
Hey.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. DJ Duke, any final thoughts?
My only thoughts is I hope whoever's watching this will get a better understanding in terms of just athletes in general and their mental makeup, and also in terms of people, us reaching out to like life coaches and things of that nature, because it's okay to have that experience of expertise and help by your side. All information can be utilized in positive ways, regardless of like what step of life that you're walking into or walking. So I encourage more people to look more into life coaches. So.
Definitely, definitely. And to my viewers, let me leave you with this quote from James Baldwin. You have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not with its idea of you. I'm Diamond D with Love and Happiness, reminding you that God loves you,